Today I'm talking to Jessica Verrilli of Twitter, who leads corporate development and strategic initiatives. Jessica, tell me about how Twitter started.
Yeah, absolutely. So Twitter started, like many startups, as an idea that three co-founders shared. This was Jack Dorsey, Evan Williams, and Biz Stone back in 2006. And they had an idea for a product which would allow people to publicly share information in short form, 140 characters, so that it could work over SMS, where people could then choose to subscribe to these updates. And so it began as a fairly simple idea, pretty quickly was beginning to be used in a lot of social type of situations, or sharing where you were going, what you were doing, and a more social context. And then between 2006 and now where we are today, we've really seen the growth of the product and then the platform take off in ways that I think that early founding team would say they could have never imagined, where it became wrapped up in national news stories.
I was going to say, you were arguing for it being used as a kind of news media today.
Yeah.
Give me some of the examples you were giving, because I think they're quite sort of compelling examples.
Yeah. So in my talk I mentioned that if it was in 2007, so still very early days for the product, maybe 2008, that wildfires broke out in San Diego, and one of the major news sources there, the LA Times, was attempting to cover them, but as the real-time information was shifting so quickly, they ended up relying on Twitter to get the best source of information about where things were moving and how people were reacting. And what they were following were the individual tweets that people were posting to the service. And that type of crowdsourcing of information to help report the news, we continue to see over and over again. It happened most recently, or more recently, with the attacks in Mumbai. People were relying on Twitter updates coming out of that hotel in the surrounding area. In the case of the earthquake in Haiti, some of the people on the ground, one such person, Luke Renner, told us that as soon as he felt the earth shaking, he turned to Twitter to both search for information, but also to begin posting about what he was experiencing. Then his content, which he pushed to Twitter, was then incorporated into more mainstream news. And CNN, I think, got in touch with him, as did Ann Curry and other well-known journalists. So there's something interesting going on between news and media and Twitter, and that rather than being these bifurcated systems of information, they're really complementary. And that's some of the stuff that I shared today with the group of media leaders here from Africa.
And you've opened up shortcodes for Twitter in a number of African countries. Give me some information on which countries you've opened up in, and what the ambition is in terms of making the service available across the continent.
Yeah, I'm personally really excited about this, and shared with everyone that we now have a shortcode available here in Cameroon. So to back up,
that's with MTN.
That's with MTN.
Yeah.
For perspective, Twitter is really a mobile information network. You can access it through mobile applications on the iPhone or Android or BlackBerry, the mobile website. But we also have a very large SMS network. So we work with carriers. We have relationships with more than 200 around the world. Now, most recently, including Cameroon with MTN. We also have a relationship with Zain in Nigeria, shortcode in Madagascar, and we're working on shortcodes in Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt through Erascom, and Kenya through Safaricom. Those haven't launched yet, but they gave us permission to share that those are on the way.
Okay, and so in terms of you doing business in Africa, you're looking essentially for mobile carriers who are interested in entering into a relationship with Twitter. Yeah,
so those are sort of standard relationships we have with mobile carriers around the world, and so we're building this SMS network around the world, which certainly includes Africa, just as it does Europe and North America.
So the operators can understand it. How's the revenue split work?
Yeah, so we don't share the financial information of how those relationships are put in place. However, we make sure that Twitter is not a premium service. So Twitter is a service that standard messaging rates apply. So in many countries like Cameroon, users pay to send SMS, but they don't pay to receive. That's the normal text messaging rate card, essentially. And so Twitter is the same way. So if you're sending a text message to Twitter, that is an MO that the user would be charged for. If you're receiving updates, those are texts that you receive that the end user won't pay for. But again,
Okay.
those messaging rates vary based on what the standard.
Who
package is.
pays for that distribution that takes place there?
So that's between the carrier and ourselves, and we don't publicly share that.
Okay, so in essence, you're picking up some of that cost.
We just don't share with how
Okay,
that breaks
no,
down.
fair enough. In terms of, you would presumably like to be in all African countries or some African countries. What's your view, or are you just
Yeah.
exploring?
No, I mean, the mission of the company is to create a global information network. And we talk a lot about an information network that can flow to the fanciest new laptops and iPads and down to the cheapest phones and the areas with the weakest signals. And so we are focused internationally on certain markets more than others, but the mission of the company is to really be this global information network. So Africa is a very big part of that, and that's why these mobile relationships are particularly important here, I think, because they help give access to information to some people who don't have high-speed internet connections or even don't have fancy phones with mobile applications or access to mobile web.
At a certain point, you get a critical mass, don't you? At a certain point, there must be enough users that are tweeting that suddenly there's a bigger conversation, and suddenly the conversation just gets bigger and bigger. What's your sense of how big that critical mass it has to be in order for the service to take off?
In a given country, or
Yeah.
the service as a whole?
In a given country?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
It's one we puzzle over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think media plays a big part. I would say if you look at the point at which things began to inflection
Classic
points,
hockey stick, as it were.
And for us, the media was a big part of that. I shared the story of the LA Times. There's countless others of CNN.
So when the media started taking it up, in a
I
way,
think
it promoted the idea.
It had a very influential role in the growth of our service, I believe, as did other things. But it's one of the reasons that we're excited to meet all the media operators here, because Twitter may be a useful complement to their core business, and their adoption may be able to help spread the use of the product.
Help promote it, yeah. Finally, what are your impressions? You've been here only for a very limited number of days, but give me your first impressions.
Yeah, I've barely slept the past 2 days just because I've been so excited to meet everyone. I've been trying to take advantage of every conversation every minute. And as we wrap this up, I'm about to go run around the streets of Yaoundé so I can actually see a little more of the city. It's just fantastic. I think one of the things that I didn't anticipate but is overwhelmingly clear is that these media operators are entrepreneurs. Many of them created the radio stations, the newspapers, or the television networks that they're now here trying to share information and learn from their peers in other countries. But the things they struggle with and the questions that they grapple with are not unlike those that Silicon Valley companies struggle with. I sat through discussions about how do we secure funding, how much focus should there be on building an audience versus a revenue model, and how many chances can we take. People had other questions about where to focus building the advertising revenue and what new models are emerging. So in that way, I was just delighted to be amongst this community of entrepreneurs, and it's just been fantastic.
Kind of fun.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah. And just lastly, what has Twitter got coming up that you can talk about? What are the developments to the service?
I think, particularly relevant here, our international strategy is really coming together and maturing. We've hired a woman named Katie Stanton to lead that whole effort. We have people on the ground in Japan, and I think you'll see more agenda-driven international efforts from the company as we build out this global information network. That's
the international side of it. In a funny sort of way, I was asking about sort of service features, things that will...
more product stuff.
Yeah.
We have a whole team internally very focused on the new user experience, onboarding new users. So many of the people I spoke to today, the past few days, they've heard of Twitter, but they're like, I don't know how to get started. That's something where we're very interested in building products and features to help that new user experience. And so I'd say stay tuned probably for more.
Do you think the current sign-on process is a bit of a barrier?
Yeah, I think we could make it better. I think we could do a better job of someone who's heard of Twitter and knows of Twitter and wants to engage. We've got a really great team focused on making that as easy as possible. So that's one area where I think you'll continue to see the company try to innovate.
Jessica Verrilli, thank you very much indeed.
Of course, thank you.